I always wanted to do it since I was like 8 years old, and I got in very quickly. I mean, I got to London in December 1956, and I started at a film company in January, 2-3 weeks later, as an apprentice, and it was a documentary company. But I had the chance to kind of go through every department, and in the next 3 years I've gone through everything from camera maintenance department to sound mixing and editing and clapper boy and all that, and by 1959 I've kind of, not that I learned everything, but I've kind of gone through. It was a documentary company.
What types of documentaries were you making?
But they were doing doing something called Petty News, which was a newsreel. I started working at that studio as a third assistant director, and then quite quickly, went to second assistant, and then I thought I knew everything, and I was kind of basically not under contract, but it was a permanent job.
Yeah.
And then I decided to leave after about 2-3 years. But by then I'd worked on fortunately on some very big movies, which were made at that studio, and I really saw, what's really actually happening when you're making a movie. And with Carol Reed, who was a very famous English director, I was fortunate enough to work on a picture with him, but as a second assistant, third assistant, I can't remember, it went back and forth. And then with Fred Zinnemann was making a movie there, and so I really saw the light of day kind of coming through the window. And then I decided to leave the studio and become a freelance assistant director, and then I did some movies as second assistant, and then eventually I was a first assistant, and then I went back to being a second assistant because there was no work, and life.
Yeah.
And that led me to coming to Hollywood, basically, not for the first time. For the first time, but not for the last time.
Oh, is that when Universal Television?
Yes, it was Universal,
Yeah.
but I was working on a film at MGM Studios in London, and with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton and everybody in it. Maggie Smith's first movie, and Orson Welles was in it.
Oh, was that the VIPs?
VIPs, yeah. And so on that I got this phone call, to go and see somebody in London, and they were looking for somebody young who was full of life and whatever, wanted to direct, and so then I went under contract to Universal, and like a week later I was out here for the first time, and then I stayed here for about 3 years. It was amazing. I mean, they employed 6,000 people.
Wow.
And everybody was there, Cary Grant on to Gregory Peck, to Lee Marvin, to what's his name?
It was Hitchcock.
Huh?
Was he under contract to Hitchcock, or?
Were they under contract?
Oh, Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, Hitchcock.
Was he at Universal.
Universal. And I mean, they sent me to observe with him on Marnie at the beginning when I didn't have my green card yet, working permits, because they thought I was English, but I was really a Hungarian refugee, And so, I met Hitchcock and watched him for 3 months with Sean Connery and Tippi Hedren doing that movie, and to have the umbrella to be able to get paid, and to really experience and observe and see how things are done. It was a huge place. I mean, Hitchcock was doing Psycho and this and that whole house and everything. And it's all there today, and it was there then. And the interesting thing is that while I couldn't direct yet, I was going crazy. So one day I went to Sydney and I said, could I have a camera crew for... Because I got very friendly with Hitchcock's editor, and then I saw all this silent footage stuff of all those streets which are in the backlog today, and some films and clips, and I said it'd be great to do a documentary on that backlog, you know. And so I think just to sit fat, you know, to keep me quiet, you know, they gave me a camera crew for 4 or 5 days.
Oh wow.
And I was shooting all the streets and this and that and that. And the black tar, which is there, was the headquarters of the studio, was just being built. So all they had was a skeleton thing. And I remember I went up on the elevator shooting all the way up, and I don't know. So I then put it together, and then one day Sid said, "So where's this film? You know, we want to see it." And by then I got friendly with everybody at the studio, and they all came to see it. And the financial treasurer of that company, his name was Al Dorskin. And it's a huge company, it was a multi-billion-dollar company by then. He said, you know, the kid is right, that's what we got to do. He said, we got to show the world how we make the movies and this and that and that, and open up the gates, and we can sell the short and everything. And then that's what gave them the idea for the Universal tours. And then the tour started maybe like a year later, 6 months later. I mean, I was back in England by then. And then eventually I went back to England. And then they called up to renew the next years, and I didn't want to come back anymore. So then I stayed in London, and because I wanted to start making movies. And that was by then, I mean, I got here in 1963. So it was around 1965, 66, because then I worked for them for 2 years in London, kind of producing a television series and directing some of those called Court Martial, and that was at Pinewood Studios. You know, we set up the whole thing, and
that was your first directing.
That was my very first steps into directing, you know. But we shot it at Pinewood, and everybody from Judi Dench on up. I mean, she was 17, I think, when she appeared in it, you know, in an episode, and so it was a great experience, you know. Went on to film in Berlin, and then from film in Berlin, I did a lot of stuff with Michael Caine in it, you know, some scenes and all the exterior stuff. It was a wonderful spy movie. Suddenly, because of Michael, you know, recommended me to some people when his Alfie movie opened up in New York. And it was a huge success, and it really made him be an international star suddenly. And so out of that, he left this message and said, you know, whatever you do tonight, don't go out, because I just flew back with these 2 people, and they want to talk to you. I told them all about you, you know, and I got this phone call that evening. And can you come to the Dorchester Hotel, which is a very big hotel in London, and around 10 o'clock, you know, and they offered me, what was it, 7 years and 14 films to direct. And I said, nobody can direct 14 good movies in 7 years. You know, it's impossible. But out of that, I went on the contract to Paramount. And the 2 people were, I didn't know who they were, you know, but it was Charlie Bluhdorn and Martin Davis. And Charlie Bluhdorn owned Golf and Western. And Golf and Western just bought Paramount Studios then. And I had this one little book, you know, and I wanted to do it with this unknown English actress called Glenda Jackson.
So was that part of the first feature you made, Negatives?
Yes, that was the first.
Back to Judd Bernard.
That was Judd, you know, and then Judd, you know, became a friend while I was in Hollywood before, while I was at Universal. And they came to London, I don't know, a year later, and they said, whatever happened to Negatives, you know, it's called Negatives, the film. Have you made it? And I said, no, I haven't. And they said, well, let me have it, because I have to see Charlie Bluhdorn, who was the guy who owned the studio in Paris, tomorrow. And because I was under contract, but they didn't want to make the movie. And Judd says, give it to me and I'll let me talk to Charlie about it, you know. So when then they called up from Paris and said, Charlie says you can make the movie. And I said, well, I don't believe it until the guy who runs Paramount in London, his name was Bud Ornstein, tells me that it's okay with him because that's he once doesn't make the movie. So that's what happened. And on Monday, you know, they said, you can have an office at Shepperton Studios and you can start preparing the film. It was really Michael's doing, you know, and he doesn't want to go up to it, doesn't want to. Every time I say to him, I said, you know, oh, stop talking about the past, you know.
So that first day that you're on the set of the first feature film you're ever going to direct, what was going through your mind? Like, were you nervous?
No, it was fantastic because by then, you know, I'd been rehearsing with the actors and I got to know them, you know, and it was just incredibly exciting, you know, and was I nervous? I'm sure I was nervous, you know. I mean, I'm nervous now if I do something, you know. That stays the same, but it was fantastic, you know, because when you make your first movie, it's very special. But it's not different from the rest, you know, later on. And must have done at least 20 movies over the years. And they just screened the movie because the BFI, British Film Institute, called up this last summer, and he said, you know, we'll be running a whole series of movies of the 60s, forgotten English movies, the great English movies of the 60s, you know.
Do you see any difference between sort of stage and film in terms of looking at like a play script and saying, well, when you're adapting it, how to translate?
Well, yes, you have to make it very visually, you know, and not, you have to go inside it, you know. Because at the plays it's very much from the outside, and you have to be in it, you know, so, and you have to open it up, but you have to open it up in a way that it wasn't in the way, you know, that you're just making it really big for no reason. You just have to make it realistic, you know, and follow the story realistically. And that was from a play, and that was a very famous play. But that too we opened up, much more from the stage, you know, into film. So I mean, by then I was kind of used to it in a way, how to convert things from stage to film. And Joe movie was great, you know, with Ellen Bates and Janet Sussman, and fantastic. It was a very emotional story and it was great. I loved doing that.
And from what I understand, it was a very personal story for the writer.
Yes, it is.
His child had gone through
his own daughter, you know, who I actually met, you know, was in the hospital, you know, but she died a few years later, you know. And it was, because it affected his life, his wife, and everything. The writer of Ruling Class, Peter Barnes, was a great friend, but that was like my third movie. And he was a wonderful guy, very eccentric playwright, and he and I used to go to the movies a lot. And he was the person who selected the programs from the British Film Institute. You know, if they wanted to do a whole series of movies on a certain subject, it was Peter who has incredible knowledge of film, although he always considered himself only a playwright. And so he and I used to see all the early Buñuel movies together on a Sunday morning. He would suddenly call up. So he was a great friend. And then when he wrote this play, I saw the play, and about 6 months later, we both thought it would be great too. But then Peter O'Toole was a friend of mine because we were going to make another movie together. But we both walked out of that film and we didn't make it. And something called Figures in the Landscape. And So I then took Peter to the theater to see the play, and he absolutely fell in love with it and bought it for me to direct it, and then 2-3 years later we actually made the movie. It was quite something when the movie came out, you know, and it became kind of a sensation in London and here in America too, you know, and it didn't have to make money. And, you know,
Peter O'Toole, I think, was nominated for...
Yeah, he was nominated for an Oscar, you know. So it was, you know, very pure. Those first 3 movies, you know, Negatives, Joe Egg, Ruling Class, it was really perfect, you know, of what I wanted to do with it, you know. And one had a lot of freedom those days, you know, from studios or producers, or you basically just not did what you, well, you did what you wanted to do, you know, which isn't the case today.
How do you think it's changed?
Well, because the money is, you know, and it's just so, it interferes with everything, and today everybody knows everything, you know, everybody's an expert, you know, and they've never directed, and, you know, they don't know how to deal with actors, and, you know, but they all have very strong opinions of how things should be, and it didn't used to be like that. You know, it's you know, because those are the people who have the power in a way.
What do you think is kind of the biggest misconception you think producers have about directing, or do you think they see it as a certain?
Well, some producers see it exactly the way it should be, you know, who know about the business, but I would say most producers are hustlers. They're, you know, opportunists, you know, or they're very clever business people, or they have a tremendous lot of money behind them, but they don't have the experience about how to make stories, how to make things happen. And so it causes a lot of problems, you know, and fights and stuff like that, you know.
You worked on Ghost in the Noonday Sun with Peter Sellers.
Yeah.
Was that a difficult shoot? Or
it was a disastrous experience, you know, because Peter was crazy at the time, and he didn't want to make the movie, and it was his project, and he developed that script for 2 years, and then I realized the week before shooting that he's never read the script, you know, and when he realized that it was a comedy, well, he kind of knew what it was, you know, but that we were going to do it with real boats on the Mediterranean, you know, he just went crazy, you know, and created all kinds of problems, and missed about 17 days of the shooting, and on the pretense of having heart attacks and stuff like that, you know. And all he wanted to do is to have the film, you know, to close the film down, you know, that he gets paid, and you know, and he couldn't do that, you know. And he was a friend of mine, you know, but it was a nightmare working with him. And he refused to act with one of the actors, with Tony Franciosa. He didn't want to be in the same frame with him. You know, and stuff like that, you know. Kind of insane. I mean, he was insane at that time.
How did you come to the point of finishing the film? Was that
my hair went grey, you know. It was a nightmare. The film went on forever, and I didn't work after that for a couple of years, because then the producers always blamed the director, saying, "Oh, it was his fault. He couldn't control Peter." You know, it wasn't that. It was an impossible situation, and they should have been there to help, but they weren't. Because actually Peter fired the producers in the first day of the movie, and the only producer left on it was who financed the movie, who was John Heyman. It could have been quite brilliant, and it wasn't, you know. So it was very difficult. It was a very difficult moment, you know, having done, you know, 3 movies into perfection, basically, you know, and then coming to America and doing the thing, and then going back into. And it was a big film for the time. And then later on, when I made up, I ended up not talking to Peter, you know. But then later on, we made up, and then Peter said, you know, when we try to get back the film from Columbia, and you recut it, and we get Spike Milligan, who is a comic genius, who actually wrote the script, who did all the goon shows in England, who wrote them. And that's how Peter Sellers become really famous through those goon shows, which was radio shows. Was that we get Spike to rewrite the narration and all that. But then we discovered that the film cost $2 million at the time, in '73, and it was written off for $4 million. So somebody took that $2 million, you know, and the books were closed at Columbia, and they're still closed today, you know. But either everybody's dead or gone, you know, who were financially responsible for. But something has happened on that, you know, and they just wanted to cover it up. But I remember, you know, because when we found, I said, my God, you know, it's ridiculous. How can it? What does it say $4 million when it only costs $2 million?
Oh, was that during the time of was it David Beagleman?
Beagleman, yeah, Beagleman. Yeah. But Beagleman used to be Peter's agent, who then ran Columbia.
Oh.
You know, so it had something to do with him.
Yeah, I remember there was something I read in a book about Cliff Robertson had
exactly.
some lawsuit with,
yeah, he forged some checks.
Yeah.
For $20,000, you know, in Cliff Robertson's name, because David was a gambler, and I guess he just needed $20,000, you know, and because of that, you know, he lost his job. But then he went on running MGM, you know, and but some of these people are borderline criminals, you know, and brilliant producers or company heads and all that. It sometimes runs hand in hand, you know. But and then, you know, years later, I ended up having dinner with Beagleman one day here in Beverly Hills, and I started talking about Ghost of Noonday's Son, you know, and I said, don't you remember, you know? Yeah, it was Peter, you know. No, I was Peter's agent. I said, no, you were running the studio at the time. I had no recollection of what happened on the film. And it cost me 2 years of my life, you know. But anyhow, but Peter then went on, did you know, Being There, you know.
Yeah. And
it was at that time when I saw Peter and here in LA, and then soon after that he died. It was very sad, you know.
And then you also did, I mean, you did such a variety. You did Remington Steele, Magnum P.I., St. Elsewhere,
yes.
Twilight Zone.
Yeah, exactly. But I was just trying to stay alive, you know, while I was looking to find a great movie.
So the TV shows were always sort of a way of you working while you were developing
Yeah,
films.
exactly, yeah, and that's what I've been doing the last 20 years, 30 years, you know, is developing lots of scripts, and then to keep saying you go and do some TV stuff, you know. And I still do that, you know, because I do, you know, I've been doing a little bit of Hannibal and, you know, and House and Breaking Bad and The Wire, but I just like to do one episode, you know. You know, because after one, you know, it just then really becomes a routine.
Yeah. with the same style.
It's the same thing, you know, and you figure out a way how to do it still like that, but different, you know, and it's very difficult to keep repeating it, you know. I mean, in television you have to shoot about 8 pages a day, between 6 to 8 pages in America. You know, when I did Breaking Bad, I mean, that's 8 days, and Julian Fellows is a great friend of mine who writes Downton Abbey, and it got Gosford Park and all that. And so Julian was saying, well, how many days do you do those things in America? And I said, 8 days. And I mean, Downton Abbey is, I think it's shot over 3 weeks each episode, you know.
So that's 8 days for about a 50-page script?
Exactly,
about, 55 pages? Wow.
Yeah.
So is that, do you have everything kind of planned out, your shot list for a television show more so than a feature?
No, you do the same thing.
Compact? No?
You do the same. I mean, you make the shot list and you never look at it, you know, and it's there, you know, but you always write out too many shots, you know, and then you have like 24 setups, and you can suddenly, at the end of the day, maybe have done 12 setups, you know, but it covers everything, you know. Things change all the time, and it's very important to keep yourself open to it, you know, because you change things all the time too, you know. And you don't, I mean, to prepare doesn't mean that you do it exactly the way you figured it. It's you figured out one way of doing it, you know, and you just may see something else, you know, while you're rehearsing, and then you have to adapt yourself to it very quickly. But you got to know what you're doing.
Is it difficult at all when you're working on a television show where they sort of have, like you've worked on so many television shows, and each show has sort of a certain look or a certain style, whether it be the acting, the photography, even the way the shots are constructed. When you go in to direct, are you looking at other episodes of the show?
Yeah, you have to know the show, or you have to look at other episodes, you know, because you have to know what the other actors, what have they done, the characters, or what, you know, because you read the script, you don't know who's who, you know, unless you had either read this other scripts and you know the progression of the story, or you have to look at it, you know. But it doesn't mean, I mean, you still do exactly what you want to do, but it has to fit into that framework of that show. It has to be part of it, otherwise it will be a disaster.
And on a television show, once you shoot the episode, do you make a first cut with the editor before the producers look at it?
Yeah, you do your director's cut. The editor does his assembly, and then after 3-4 days you go in and then you do your cut. And then the best thing is just to run 100 miles an hour away from there, because then the producers start on it and they recut everything, you know. They recut it, you know, into what their vision is, you know. But then, I mean, I shot it according to the script, what they had wrote. But there's always a complete kind of difference of opinion of, I don't like white shots or whatever, you know, that they take all the white shots out. And, it's not a very satisfactory way of working. It's actually a terrible way of working, you know, because then they want everything fast and all that. Just close up, it's terrible, you know. You can't do that, you know.
Yeah, see, in television, it's just sort of it's almost the style of having so many close-ups. I guess maybe the producers think the screen is smaller since you're not...
Yeah, but when you put a movie on, an old movie on television, it looks 1,000 times better than anything, you know. So they don't think, you know, they think it's very modern to go like that, you know.
But I think there's something so nice about having a wide shot and seeing the actors move within it.
of course,
and interacting with one another.
I know, but it's not on. With most of them, you know. I mean, when I did Breaking Bad, it was great. You know, they said you should do whatever you want to do, you know, and then. I mean, they got in on that as well, but they basically left it alone.
When you're prepping a television show, because they have different directors coming in every week.
Yeah.
When you're prepping the episode with your AD and with the crew, are the producers there and sort of giving you notes before you even start shooting?
No, not really, no. No, because they're too busy. You know, so many producers on a TV show. There's about 7 producers, but there's somebody's always there to drive you crazy, you know. And somebody comes with you when you're choosing locations, you know. And it has to kind of fit in to how many moves you're gonna make that day and how far are those locations, and you can't have to this great location but you can't shoot here because it's too far from that. So all those logistics come into it, you know.
Do you choose your DP when you're shooting episodic, or they have their own?
No, they have their own DPs, you know. But most of the DPs are quite wonderful on those TV shows. But you know what, like in Romeo's Bleeding, I knew what I wanted it to look like, and then I wanted to find a DP, which I did, you know, who very diffused colors, you know, and highlights and stuff, and just look at their stuff and you know, whether this person is right or wrong for it, you know. And so on Romeo I used Dariusz Wolski. That was his first movie, and he'd become a major cameraman after that, you know.
Because he had done a lot of commercials.
Derek, he did. He used to do commercials before. He still does, you know. But he did all the Pirates of Caribbean movies, but I mean, he's incredibly. And I wanted it very dark, and the lights everything very dark, and so it's great like that. But it's that, you know. But it's and you know, you meet and you talk and you see whether you can get on with each other and all that. It's very important.
Do you like a DP to sort of give you their own shot list and sort of interpret what they think?
No, absolutely not. No, it works the other way around.
So you'd rather give them sort of your aesthetic?
Yeah, but I mean, you explain your shot, you know, and then if he's got a suggestion about it, then you can accommodate it, you know. But it doesn't. No, they're there to absolutely service you. And it's a big misconception about it, you know. They say, oh, well, it's an incredible, you know, his angles and all that. Well, the angles come from the director, you know, where you put the
compositions.
Absolutely, you know, unless it's somebody who's totally on visual and doesn't understand. There are directors like that who come from comedy, who are great comedy directors, but they were never interested about visuals, you know. But you have to spend, this was very important to go through the whole script with the DP and explain how you want to shoot it, how you see it, you know, so he understands, you know. Then they're very strange DPs, you know, because most of the time they don't really read the script, you know.
You've encountered that where the
and then you're working away, and I said, you know, this is supposed to be night, you know. Oh my God, you know, I mean. It's quite amazing, very famous DPs, you know, they just don't have the patience or the understanding of what it needs.
And when it comes to rehearsal with actors, if you do have the time in pre-production to rehearse, do you prefer that, or would you rather have actors come to the set fresh?
No, not at all. No, you have to work with them, you have to rehearse before you start the movie. If it's a film, I would probably rehearse at least minimum a week, if not 2 weeks, with them. And then you have to get inside each other, you know. And they just come to the set, you can't do that. And I mean, as it is, I always go, when I go in the morning early, you know, I go into the makeup room and spend time with them, just talking to them. It's terribly important, and nobody does that.
Kind of gauging where they are.
But they're just because they have to perform those characters, and there may be something important to talk about or talk it out. Or
do you like to, when you're rehearsing the actors in pre-production rehearsals, do you start planning out where you're going to put the camera and what shots you're going to make and how you're going to stage it?
Yeah.
Or do you leave that more the staging aspect and the shot aspect when you get to the
you have to, you go on the set and you rehearse the scene and you're staging it, and you really knock it into shape, until it becomes shootable. And then meanwhile you just walk they will know. Because always I keep saying, wherever I am, that's where the camera is, Yeah. If I'm filming the two of them, or if I'm behind you or whatever. But it's very important to, and it's only really for the DP. It's the most important thing, really. So he understands how you see it and where you see it, how you want to shoot it, and what you want out of it, or what shock you're trying to get out of it, or shooting the two of you with somebody coming behind you with a knife, which you don't see but we see, and how much of it, what you want to show, and all that. It's as much to do with it as the script is, of how you visually see that. Well, the job of the director is to fulfill your vision of that piece of material, of the drama you're working with, and doing, and also to make your actors so comfortable that they can function and do anything you ask them to do, and you have to be able to control everybody, not in an egoistic way, but and you can either bully them into doing it, or you can actually do it that they hardly even notice that they're being directed, from your material and from your actors, from your DP, from everything, to create this incredible illusion, which is real life, but it's totally artificial, And that's the magic of making movies.